Hi there everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name's James and today we have once again returned to the Blue Palace. This is my main project at the moment and I wondered if you guys would like to come on a tour with me and explore the new rooms and new interiors that I've added to the Blue Palace, because there is so much that I've done to the interiors since our last visit here. So let's carry on and let's explore the interiors of this magnificent huge build here. If you guys don't know, I built this palace during the lockdown period. So all throughout those 4 months we was in lockdown, I expanded and really recreated the Blue Palace from what was once a country house into a massive sprawling palace complex with no world edit or anything. It's just purely my own skills, really. And this project means a lot to me. I hope you guys love it as much as I do. So let's go on and explore this magnificent building. So now we're in the Queen's Courtyard of the Blue Palace project, and I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, we have actually done an update tour before, but I don't think I narrated it. So this time I thought it might be interesting if I narrate it and tell you guys all about the new additions to the palace here. We're going to start off with entering the palace from the Queen's Courtyard here. This is the Queen's sort of official grand entrance, public entrance into the Blue Palace, but also it's a public courtyard as well. And when the public come and visit the Blue Palace, they would enter the building from this courtyard and make their way around the state apartments and leave through the King's Courtyard on the other side, which is symmetrical to this one. Anyway, let's go inside. Enough talking, and let's go and explore. If you guys remember correctly, this staircase is inspired by the Caserta Royal Palace in Italy, which I kind of recreated here as the Queen's staircase, the kind of state processional route up to the Queen's apartments on the first floor. And I'm so proud of this. It's so magnificent. It's so overwhelmingly grand because of its scale. And it is just a hugely monumental, grand space, and I just love it so much. If we walk in here, this is the start of the Queen's staterooms in the Blue Palace. This is her ballroom, and it is used for official occasions such as galas, performances, and also the clues in the name. It's the official kind of ballroom in the Queen's State Apartments. We've seen all this before, but I just wanted to show you guys once again the magnificence of this room. It's inspired by the Russian imperial palaces, places like Peterhof, the Winter Palace, etc., Catherine Palace. So let's make our way through. So we've gone from Imperial Russia to China because this room is inspired by this chinoiserie style, which is a Chinese kind of theme for interiors, which was very popular in the early 19th century. Particularly was a favourite of George IV's, King of England, and he built his pavilion in Brighton. So that's a massive Indian palace, and on the inside it's Chinese decoration known as chinoiserie. And this magnificent banqueting hall, which is the Queen's official state banqueting hall, is very much inspired by the banqueting hall at the Royal Pavilion. So you just have this magnificent, this crazy kind of colour scheme, this enormous chandelier accompanied by 4 other small ones, and this sprawling kind of decoration on the dome there, which is meant to represent like leaves, and the grey kind of pointy thing underneath it in the banqueting hall in the pavilion is a dragon, and then below that hangs the chandelier. We have these draperies along the windows here, and I'll show you some little clues into this palace that we didn't see before. So it all looks well and good in this room until you notice that over here there's a small door. Oh, what's that for? You'd never even notice it. But actually, it now leads into the private apartments of the Blue Palace. And when you're exploring, you'll notice these staircases everywhere because they lead up to different levels of the private apartments of the Queen. And we'll see them at some point in this video. But we're going to focus on the staterooms to begin with. But yeah, a little clue into what's behind these massive grand rooms. So we'll continue through, and there's so much more to see. So and then we have the Queen's Saloon, which again is another room from the Royal Pavilion, and it's a kind of drawing room, gathering room. And you'll notice from last time there's a new addition to the ceiling. I've added this kind of golden vault decoration on the ceiling because I just want a bit more splendour to the room, and so I created this kind of vaulted ceiling effect with the gold to give it a bit more grandeur, which I love. There's a small alcove there with the fireplace. I was thinking of building furniture in these rooms, but I don't want to spoil the I don't want to clutter it up with furniture, you know, but I might do one day. Continuing through the Queen's staterooms, we now approach the Queen's Asian, kind of Chinese-looking drawing room, which again you'll notice has been massively changed since last time. I have added another story to this room to give it that sort of monumental theme. I thought last time this room just wasn't big enough, you know, compared to the King's apartments. I wanted the King and the Queen's apartments to kind of mirror each other in terms of scale. And if you remember from before, this room was only 1 story high, and I just thought it wasn't really overwhelmingly grand as I wanted it to be. So I added 1 more story to the room with this beautiful ceiling which I created. Just to give it a bit more sort of beauty, I guess. And it being the state apartments, these apartments are all about show and it displaying wealth and power. So I wanted these rooms to really represent that. We still have the original colours, the colour scheme, but the room's just been massively redecorated, rebuilt. And you'll notice there's some more small doors over here, which lead to even more back stairs in the apartments that lead to the Queen's private rooms. Because the Queen has a secret sort of mezzanine of rooms on split levels. Let's continue through. This is my favourite room in the Queen's apartments. It is the Queen's bedchamber, which I have just completely recreated in this magnificent style. And it being the Queen's bedchamber, it needed to be a room that was very ornately decorated because it's the central room in the apartments of the monarch. It's also a space where, if we're talking as if this palace was being used in real life, this would be the scene where the Queen would give birth, and so the room really needs to be of complete grandeur because it needs to represent the kind of dynastic power which is created in this room. the lineage of the royal family. So the space really needs to be opulent. Births also during the 18th century was a public affair in the royal courts usually, especially in France. On the ceiling here you'll notice there's these different shades of yellows, pinks and greens. These colours, so I'm told, represent motherhood. The colour scheme is supposed to represent motherhood, which gives the room its kind of theme of motherhood, parenthood, childbirth, etc. We have a skylight as well, and obviously this beautiful canopy Duchess style bed here with the overhang. It's just beautiful. So let's take a quick look at the Queen's private apartments. You'll see the sign there, and this first room is the Queen's kind of lobby area. So it's a big ornate room. And it leads off into the Queen's other areas of her apartments. So this is her private domain, and these rooms are used for the Queen's private use. Either end you'll see an enfilade of rooms, and we'll just quickly go down here and we'll explore these rooms. So most of them are little studies and bathrooms and cabinets and things, all designed for private use. So they're just tiny little rooms that aren't really that, amazing to look at because they are designed for private use. But this is a new room in the Queen's private apartments, and this is the Queen's gallery. And it's used, I guess, for strolls and small parties and things. But it's the Queen's private kind of gallery, where she would display artwork, have kind of little gatherings and parties, and then this room here is just another adjoining closet space. But you can see the kind of the magnificence that I've created on the ceiling here, with the endless amounts of gold which I've used in these apartments. It's a bit more subtle in the private apartments because obviously they're not really that much for show, they're for private use. But you'll notice in the staterooms that we've been looking at, the gold is much more, there's just so much more of the gold in the Queen's staterooms than there is in the private apartments. Again, with these little staircases, you'll see them everywhere in the private apartments because they lead off into so many different rooms, so many different areas of the private apartments. So the Queen's private rooms, there's just so many of them, and way more than she needs. But they just kind of expand all over this, all around the courtyards, and we'll see much more of the Queen's private apartments next time. But there is some more to see this way. So we'll go down here. And what's that? Another door to another staircase. And in here we have even more rooms. We've seen this one before, I'm pretty sure. And this one, they're still quite plain. It's still all a work in progress. But then we have this beautiful new staircase, which was inspired by the King's Staircase at Hampton Court, and the coloured walls and the ceiling are supposed to represent painted allegorical scenes. Obviously, you can't really create that in Minecraft, but that's the theme, is a painted wall and ceiling effect. And you sort of come up the staircase here and visualize this room of just colour and excitement, really. It's such a different room compared to all the other ones, and it's really beautiful with that central design. It's really wonderful. And then we have this last room, which is, oh no, second to last, which is another space of the Queen's private apartments, another kind of a study or library or sitting room, and another one just there. Really, the room's endless in the Queen's private apartments. There's so many, but this is like her little private staircase, which she would use, or maybe private visitors to the Queen would use to gain access to her through her apartments. It really is a maze. I mean, to somebody who's never really come here before, it really is a maze of just rooms. You wouldn't know where to go. So then we have this absolutely insane room, which was originally the Queen's large chamber. Well, it still is, but I've just completely transformed it. Because I was going to build rooms above the Queen's apartments, like I explained last time, for her children and her servants. But I just couldn't, because I built the King's apartments after the Queen's, and the rooms turned out to be a lot bigger. So I thought I had to kind of do the same with the Queen's rooms. They have to mirror each other. So I built this magnificent room with all these crazy designs on the walls. I just went over the top. But you'll notice with me, the over the top theme is really my style. I don't do simple. I like to build extravagant things, make things as grand as possible. Otherwise, I'm not happy with the build. I have to make it just as insane and as grand as physically possible. And I think this room really does kind of fit that theme of just crazy decoration. But I think it's so beautiful. And it's built in a style which I call the Empire style, which is a white and gold theme that you'll notice in the new rooms of the Blue Palace. And we'll see more of it as we explore. And then we've just got the usual, the Queen's music room, which you've seen before, is a bit more simple compared to the other rooms. It seems the further you enter into the Queen's apartments, the grander and the bigger the rooms get. But this room is a bit more simple, a bit more sort of feminine, a bit more playful with this ceiling, which is supposed to represent plasterwork. So these swags sort of hanging down here is supposed to represent plasterwork instead of that vaulted painted ceiling you see in the other rooms. This ceiling has a plasterwork ceiling, which I think is wonderful. Continuing through, we've got the Queen's dining chamber. We've seen all this before. There's the kind of dining table there. And this room is huge, but you can also use this room as a kind of a ballroom or a drawing room, just because of the size of the space. And then we have the Queen's audience room here. And then we have the Queen's guard room, just towards the end here. We've seen all this before, that's why I'm sort of rushing through. So that's the end of the Queen's apartments. That's the end of the Queen's state apartments. And now we're going to enter into the Hall of Giants here, which is a public space, and it separates the King and the Queen's apartments from one another. It joins them all together. But this room is part of the staterooms, but it isn't necessarily, it doesn't belong to any of the apartments. It's a separate room used for public functions, and it's the main ceremonial kind of reception room in the Blue Palace. When the court has any kind of function, it will be held in here. And I just love this room. Look at the detail, look at the colours. I think this was the first room that I built in the Blue Palace, the first interior that I created. And look just how beautiful it is, how crazy the colour scheme is. But it really works, and it's so pretty and so colourful and so beautiful. I just love it. Really is something, that room. It's just so quirky and over the top, and I just love it. And you can probably guess, it's inspired by the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. Now we are going to enter the King's Grand Apartments. We've seen these before, but I don't think I've ever really narrated it before. So we'll just have a quick walk through the King's Guard Room. So these rooms start off as the same layout as the Queen's, but then they change. And this room is inspired by the Golden Drawing Room at the Winter Palace in Russia. I believe the Golden Drawing Room is a part of Marie Fedorovna's apartments in the Winter Palace. I'm not sure though, but this room is inspired by that. I love Imperial Russia. I love the architecture of Imperial Russia, and you can kind of see the theme kind of runs in the Blue Palace of Russia. But this room really is quite beautiful. Moving on, we have the King's Privy Chamber here, which is a kind of private audience chamber. And it's really interesting. I got this interior style off of Pinterest because there was a design for like a drawing room in a country house, a British country house. And I used that style and kind of created my own theme, really, in this room. It inspired me to create a room in the King's apartments. In here we have a staircase, which isn't fully completed, but that is the King's private staircase, which he would use when he was to enter in his apartments, or if the King was to have any kind of private guests. This is where they would come in through. But it's such an interesting room, and the colour scheme is so different and so unusual. But I really like it. I think it works really well. Next up, we have the King's. What is this room? The audience chamber. So it's the official kind of state audience rooms. Any kind of formal council meetings or any acts of state would be practiced in this room, acted out in this room. There's the King, obviously the King's seat there under a canopy. And I love the ceiling in this room. It's so beautiful, but it's so different. And what I like about all of these rooms in this palace is they're so colourful and they're so different, which I think really works. But yeah, which again, the Russian theme continues. There's another name for it, but in the Blue Palace, this room kind of is inspired by the Winter Palace once again in Russia. This room really carries on that theme of Russia, at least I think it does. But it is a room within the Winter Palace, which I've recreated here in the Blue Palace with that beautiful ceiling there. And we'll just have a quick walk through here. And we'll view this little corridor, which is really just wonderful. It's so big, it's so... Just the scale of it is wonderful. And they have that continued vaulted kind of look on the ceiling. And this room looks out onto the King's Courtyard. You can't really see it very well because the windows are a bit further away from the wall. You can kind of see the King's Courtyard. And then we'll continue through. The next room is my favourite room in the King's Grand Apartments, the King's State Apartments. It's so amazing. And that is the King's Large Chamber, which I think is just amazing. I love the detail. I love the gold and white colour scheme. I love the ceiling. I love every part of this room. And this is what I call the Empire style. This is high Empire style, which I think is so magnificent. And it's a long, narrow kind of room. But look at the detail. Look at the opulence of this room. It's so beautiful. And here's the fireplace with another fresco above, and just this amazing ceiling. And the room is just so beautiful. It just really is magnificent. I'm so in love with this space. I'm so proud of this room. It really is just wonderful. But yeah, that's the king's large chamber, which I created there. And this is right on the corner of the palace. So you'll notice from before, the queen's large chamber was on the corner as well. So they follow the same kind of layout, but each apartment is a bit different from the other. Yeah, they are similar in terms of layout, but each apartment is a bit more just slightly different compared to each other. But anyway, we'll just continue through here into the next room in the apartments, which is the king's bedchamber. And for the king's bedchamber, it's not really that opulent, is it? I mean, it is, but it's not really what you'd expect. Not as opulent as the queen's bedchamber, but it still has that feel. Again with the skylights. And we'll just have a quick walk past the balustrade here. And there's the king's bed, the size of it. And there's an open door and you can see into the large chamber. But also there's this door here. And we'll just have a quick walk through and down the stairs. So here we are. You'll notice this enfilade of rooms, and this is what I call the King's Route, or the King's Passage. It leads, this ground floor level of rooms leads downstairs and then back up again to the first floor into the King's private apartments, because on the first floor in his bedchamber there's no access to his private rooms, which are built in that wing over there. That kind of central block over there. So there's no way of getting to those apartments from the king's bedchamber. So I had to build a route underneath his bedchamber so that he could access those apartments from here, if that makes any sense. Because there's just no way of accessing those rooms, because behind this room there's nothing. It's just the other side of the courtyard. So I had to kind of improvise and make a way for the king to get to the private apartments from this room. But yes, moving on. This is the Salon of Abundance. So this room would be used for serving food, serving coffee, tea, a small buffet of fruits, because it follows the same theme of rooms in Versailles. Oops. It follows the same route, the kind of same theme of the Palace of Versailles, the Salon of Abundance, which was used for the same purpose as serving the court. So this room was used for that. It was a kind of a buffet kind of room. But it also acts as a small antechamber, because it leads into the next series of rooms, which you'll notice are inspired by Versailles as well. But yeah, so these three rooms that we've just seen, the large chamber, the king's bedchamber, and the abundance chamber, are all in Empire style, which I was telling you about. So this next room here is inspired by the Palace of Versailles once again. It's called the Salon of War. It's called the Salon of War because of the kind of harsh decoration in this room. the kind of fiery ceiling, there's just the harsh decor of this room. The Salon of War, it's a very grand space. All the same, though, it's so detailed, and these are the first three rooms that you would enter when you came into the King's Grand Apartments. And then over here, again with these small secret hidden doors, you walk through here, and then you're in the King's private apartments. So you see, this is that block that I was telling you about, which the King's private rooms are located in. And then, okay, so then we're going to enter this room, which is the King's Grand Gallery. And this is the first room you enter when you come into the King's apartments. This room has to be built on a grand scale because it's the first room that you enter in the King's Grand Apartments. So I created this room in a very opulent style. It's the King's version of the Hall of Mirrors. And it's also his throne room, as you can see. The throne is built over here under a canopy. And so this room serves as the King's main kind of ceremonial reception room, and also his throne room,